our film links into horror conventions because of the scene in which Amelia Jennings, our female protagonist, is being chased through the woods by a mysterious entity. This is a common feature in many horror films, like the Scream films. Along with the sounds of twigs snapping in the background, also exaggerates the fear that came over her while in the woods, and made the atmosphere of the scene full of tension and suspense, which is another element often used for horror films. Our film also links to the horror conventions because the protagonist is a female who is alone in the woods, which makes her appear more vulnerable like many other female protagonists. For example, Sigourney from the Scream films, who is always trying to escape the person trying to kill her, who is presented as a vulnerable character mainly in the first Scream film. The opening sequence to our film is similar to that of Sweeney Todd. Sweeney Todd opening credits. Ours isn't animated like that, but the point is that both the opening sequences give an impression as to what will happen throughout the horror film, without giving the main details away.
Our film links to the horror convention with the use of the white female as the protagonist. In most films, directors will use white females to be the victim of the antagonist, with Halloween, The Grudge and Psycho to name a few examples. We used our time and setting as a forest at dusk. This links to the horror conventions as forests are very compact and get dark very quickly, adding senses of eeriness and fear. A few examples of horror films set in forests are The Blair Witch Project and Dog Soldiers.
Like most horror films, our film has the conventional red text over the title cards, which are accompanied by the images that link throughout the film, almost like a prologue, just like in the opening sequence of The Cabin in the Woods. However, ours takes a slight twist, as unlike the professionally photographed images or computer-generated images that you usually see in a film, as are hand-drawn child's pictures. Something else that challenges the conventions is the order of our film. Unlike the opening of most horrors, where a seemingly innocent passerby is murdered, ours begins with the film's ending. We do, though, keep in with the convention of using children as the antagonists, much like Children of the Corn, The Omen and Orphan. We also use a white female protagonist who is isolated and seemingly dies because of her isolation and fear.
From the experience of producing our film, I have learned that what we had perceived to be light enough, but still dark at the same time, was actually too dark on camera. So we had to film what we had already filmed again, so that it was visible and a lot clearer than the previous shots we had filmed. I also learned that we need to consider our audience's level of understanding of the film in scenes because we reached a point in the process where we found that other people didn't understand what was going on or didn't know why it was happening. So we had to edit our film so that there was a wider understanding throughout.
Through the whole experience of creating our piece, I learned that there are a lot of shots which we didn't use. For example, we had a lot of over-shoulder shots which we left out, and we had other shots which suited better. Also, I found that filming isn't a one-day thing, and that you have to take out more than one day to film, as our group had to shoot on 3 different occasions. Finally, I found out that editing is more complicated than I thought, and that it would be adding transitions and cutting up footage. However, with the addition of colour correction in our project, amongst other complicated things, I had to spend a lot of time on the editing.
Our film represents teenagers and almost fits the stereotype that all teenagers are bad and rebellious, who drink, do drugs and commit crimes. It's a really negative portrayal of what teenagers get up to when they're in groups. It's something that older generations would be likely to think when focusing on teenagers, especially when they're in groups. However, we do use something that is quite controversial to the stereotype, that boys are the only ones who misbehave and instigate bad behaviour. We have challenged this stereotype, as it is shown that the girls are actually the ones who influence the boys, something that is seemingly unheard of. The use of children as the antagonists challenges the concept of children being sweet and innocent, as they're the ones who, although were initially the victims, are the ones who go around kidnapping and eventually murdering people who have harmed them, which would not be stereotypical of children. I'm not sure what teenagers would think of their portrayal in this. I guess they would be kind of offended in some way. But at the same time, I wanted to highlight the fact that boys aren't always the ones that instigate bad behaviour. I wanted to show them that there is actually another side to the sweet or usually seductive girl we see in films.
I'd like to think that some teenagers would be quite shocked, maybe even in disbelief, of what had happened during the film. I also know that there would be teenagers that would be shocked because of the stereotype, which portrays them to be criminals and drunks and addicts that would do that kind of thing. In my opinion, and I also think that the way we present teenagers is stereotyped to the full, and that many teenagers watching that film would feel that it was a harsh stereotype that says they are completely irresponsible.
I feel that teenagers would be shocked with the scene about the fire, and some could empathise with the characters as they sound distressed and one of them is crying, again emphasising the innocence of the characters and forcing the viewers to feel for her. Also, children dying in films is very taboo, so the fact that multiple children died could force the viewers to dislike the characters and say that it's their own fault.
I'm definitely more aware now of how difficult it is and how much work goes into this process. I used to think it was simple as filming some clips, cutting them together, and that was it, but it's so much more than that. The whole process is a lot of hard work. First of all, you need to plan what you actually want to create. It's great to have an idea of what you want, but until you can think of how you want to create it, and then you have nothing to go from. Then you need to think about characters, which involves casting and costumes and how you want them to act, so like mannerisms, their speech, how they are in general. And it's a lot more difficult as it seems because we need to fit in with our schedule as well as their own, and it needs to correspond. It's also difficult with the weather, which is a definite cause for most schedule clashing. We can't exactly arrange with the weather when we want to film. Then after all that's sorted, we need to think about camera angles and make sure all our shots are clear with the right lighting. Then it's down to the editing, which takes much longer than anything else in the process. The music, transitioning, and the order of the film is all down to this. This whole process is much more difficult and takes a lot more time than it appears to take. It seems so much easier when it is done professionally.
I enjoyed filming during production because I like doing that kind of thing rather than acting within the film itself. I like being on camera because it's something that I didn't have much experience in, so it gave me a chance to develop new skills. I also enjoyed the editing when I got the chance because I found the whole process interesting because it was something that I had never experienced before. I learnt some skills like colour correction and the slowing of the duration of the film. I also found this quite confusing due to all the different techniques that were being used.
My role in the project was the editor. I found that I filled this role well as I took multiple lessons to perfect with the addition of specific music and volume levels for every clip in our piece. Also, the colour correction for every shot took a couple of lessons to complete, but with the addition of Alex and Ellen helping at points made the job easier and less tedious. I had to learn a lot of new things in order to complete the edit. A lot of the help come from the teachers, but I had to search some tutorials on YouTube for things such as the end title.
The entire thing was stressful to say the least, although I did enjoy the process in some ways, as it was a completely new experience and I've learned so much through it. As my main role was director, and I didn't realise at first how much responsibility that role entails until we were nearly halfway through the process of making the film and had to set times for us to film as well as working around our own busy schedules. I also had to oversee almost all of other work on the film, so I was present when all of the editing was done, as well as doing a lot of it myself to ensure that it was done the way I wanted it to be done. So it was all to higher standards and the vision I wanted it to be. The editing was definitely difficult and a very long process. However, it was quite fun getting to change the order of the clips and muddling things around and adding the music. It was an interesting experience to add music to different sections because we had to find the music first. So that took a long time. And then we got to rearrange it. Like some bits of ours, the music that would usually be the start is toward the end, and what would usually be at the end is at the start. It was also nice to play around and learn more about the computers because when we first started I had no idea how to work Macs in any way possible, but now I've managed to figure out some of the programs and I feel more comfortable and confident in how to work them. I can't really say that my role as an actress was fun. In some ways it was, but at the same time, having to re-film footage was time-consuming and very painful because it was cold and our environment was kind of harsh, and for a lot of it I had to keep going over the trip and hurting myself a lot so that we could get the right footage for it. And I've actually got a scar on my leg from when I fell one time and I landed wrong and I caught a branch instead of the leaves that I was supposed to fall on, and now I've got a scar on my leg because of that.
Overall, I think that the process went well, other than having a few small issues, like getting the lighting wrong and having to film certain sections again to get it right, so the scene was visible on camera. I also feel that it went well as a whole because we were able to get the colouring of the shots to roughly match through using the colour corrector through trial and error. Although we got the white and black balances right so that the colouring of the sequence looked seamless.
Overall, I feel that the project went well and it was successful. I think this because from a few things missing out, our final piece was the same as the plan. Also, we filled our roles correctly, with Ellen filming the majority, Alex directing the piece and me editing.
It was a real eye-opener to me. Before the preliminary task I wasn't as involved as much because I had a conflicting schedule with our editing experience. But with this I've been here for the entirety of it, so it's taught me a lot about the whole process and how it works, and it's actually a lot more complicated than it appears. I think at first I was really excited about being the director. I was like, yes, I get to boss people around. But then it took a while for my responsibilities to set in, and then there was a few times after that I just felt I really want to give up because no one's listening, I'm doing everything, and it was just really difficult. But I know I needed to create a film opening that I would want to see. Like, if I went to the cinema and saw that, I'd want to watch the rest of it, and I knew that just motivated me. It made me want to finish it. It was really tiring, especially since I had to say and work overtime on creating things like the title cards, especially when it was on a Mac, and use it and taking time out of my parties. Like some of the footage, it was filmed on New Year's Eve, and I was at an actual party, and I just stopped everything. I was like, no, we need to be serious now. Can we film this? And it put a downer on things because we'd gone from really excited to really serious, but at the same time it helped it. It made it so much better than it would have been if I'd just filmed like everyone acting normally. But overall, I think it's been a really difficult process, but at the same time I have enjoyed seeing what working in the film industry would be like, which is something I want to do. And having experienced a piece of that, I know how hard I've got to work in the future and how long it is going to take for me to get where I want.